Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Robert Adams, and joining us today from the Royal Australian Air Force is Squadron Leader Stacey Davids. We warmly welcome the family of Private Horatio Kane, whose story will be told shortly. This evening, we're honoured to acknowledge His Excellency General, the Honourable David Hurley, Governor-General of the Commonwealth of Australia, and Her Excellency, Mrs. Linda Hurley. The Honourable Kim Beazley, Chair of the Council of the Australian War Memorial, accompanied by Ms. Susie Annis and fellow council members, and Mr. Matt Anderson, Director of the Australian War Memorial. This afternoon, we also warmly welcome Mr. Bob Richards and Mr. Bill Marklew, representing Pause for Hope and Understanding, and Group Captain Matt Cottrell, retired, representing the Air Force Association. As always, we welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. The live stream of this ceremony is made possible by the Returned and Services League of Australia and the RSL and Services Clubs Association. We welcome members who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by family and visitors to the memorial. If you are able, I now invite you to please stand and join in singing the national anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 103,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations over more than a century. But first we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private Horatio Kane. Horatio Kane was born on the 12th of December 1905 in Larne, a town on the east coast of County Antrim in Northern Ireland. The son of William and Margaret Kane, he immigrated to Australia at the age of 22. After marrying Ada Cole in 1937, 2 children were born to the couple, Margaret in 1938 and John in 1939. The family lived in the Sydney suburb of Auburn while Horatio worked as a truck driver. 34-year-old Horatio Kane enlisted in the 2nd Australian Imperial Force on the 8th of July, 1940. He soon joined the recently formed 2nd 17th Infantry Battalion at Ingleburn Army Camp, southwest of Liverpool. Private Kane and his comrades undertook basic training at Ingleburn before marching to Bathurst Army Camp for subunit field training. In October 1940, the 20th Brigade, of which Kane's battalion was a part of, sailed from Sydney Harbour to the Middle East. Kane traveled in the converted cruise liner Queen Mary, arriving in the Middle East in November. In early March 1941, the 2nd 17th relieved subunits of the 6th Division destined for Greece in the foremost defenses near Mersa Brega, east of Tripoli in western Cyrenaica or Libya. After German forces landed at Tripoli to bolster the Italians, they soon advanced eastwards. The 2nd 17th was involved in a general withdrawal of British forces to Tobruk. When the Axis made a major attack to capture Tobruk at Easter, the 2nd 17th held against German tanks and remained in position while engaging enemy infantry. The German tanks were destroyed by artillery and supporting arms. Tobruk was under siege for over 8 months, besieged by a German-Italian army commanded by General Erwin Rommel. The Nazi propagandist Lord Haw-Haw derided the tenacious defenders as rats, a term that the Australian soldiers embraced as an ironic compliment. The Royal Navy and the Royal Australian Navy provided the garrison's link to the outside world, known as the Tobruk Ferry. Half the Australian garrison was relieved in August, the rest in September and October. Before Kane was relieved on the 25th of September 1941, he was wounded, suffering from a shell wound to his leg. Evacuated to hospital for treatment and then recovering in a convalescent depot, he returned to duty in mid-November. By this time, his unit had moved to Hill 69 near Gaza in Palestine, where it was to remain for the rest of the year. During the first half of 1942, the battalion undertook training in Lebanon and Syria. The war in North Africa became critical for the British 8th Army in early July 1942, when German and Italian forces reached El Alamein in Egypt, too close to Cairo for comfort. The 9th Division moved to the area from Syria and held the northern sector in protracted defense for almost 4 months, while the British prepared for an offensive under new command. The 2nd 17th reached the forward defenses in mid-July. After an excursion to block an enemy threat in the south, the battalion moved to forward defended locality of Tel El Isa in early August. For over 2 months, The men of the 2nd 17th observed enemy defenses before moving to a reserve training area in preparation for the Battle of El Alamein. The battalion performed with great distinction throughout the battle, with Allied victory marking the beginning of the end of the Western Desert Campaign, eliminating the Axis threat to Egypt, the Suez Canal, and the Middle Eastern and Persian oil fields. During the fighting, Private Kane was again wounded in action, this time suffering from a gunshot wound that necessitated the amputation of one of his fingers. Having received treatment and spent time recovering, Kane rejoined his battalion in mid-December. At this time, the 9th Division was recalled from the Middle East to face the Japanese advance through the Pacific Islands, which threatened Australia. Kane and his comrades in the 2nd 17th left Suez in late January 1943, arriving in Sydney late February. Arriving in Australia, Kane transferred to the 2nd 1st Headquarters Guard Battalion, possibly as a result of the wounds he had received in action. Members of the battalion were responsible for guarding headquarters, with companies and platoons attached to different divisional headquarters. In support of its designated headquarters, the units moved to Papua and New Guinea, firstly to Milne Bay, then to Lae, and on to Finschhafen, before returning to Australia with their respective brigades. Kane embarked in Cairns in late July 1943, arriving at Milne Bay at the end of the month. The following month, he was evacuated, suffering from fever. By early February, his numerous bouts of illness had been diagnosed as malaria, and he was again evacuated, troublingly unwell. His situation continued to deteriorate, and on the 25th of February 1944, he died of malaria, complicated by acute nephritis and hemolytic anemia. Survived by his wife and 2 children, Horatio Kane was 39 years old. Today, his remains lie buried in Bomana War Cemetery in Papua New Guinea under the inscription chosen by his grieving family. His duty fearlessly and nobly done, ever lovingly remembered. His name is listed on the Roll of Honor on my left, among almost 40,000 Australians who died while serving in the Second World War. His photograph is displayed today by the Pool of Reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private Horatio Kane, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director, staff and volunteers, we thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorial's development project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.